Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to G-Bear's Off-Road Ways, a homestead in the desert. And we got snow in the mountains. Yeah, that rainstorm we got was not as big a storm as we expected. About 5/8 of an inch. But that's a whole nother story. Anyway, my panels got washed for free. Everything's nice and clean. So they're all producing outlandish power right now. But got a special request. Well, actually not a request, more like my offer to help Donna out with a little bit of information about solar panels. All right, so we're going to talk about these right here. This is the Harbor Freight brand 100-watt solar system. Comes with 4 panels, wires, charge controller, some light bulbs, and just the average stuff. It's got a splitter so you can tie all the panels in parallel into one wire that goes to your charge controller. All right, so the questions that she had was, is it better to hook up the panels in series or parallel? All right, if you read the manual on Harbor Freight solar panels, it's going to tell you not series, not with these. These are amorphous panels. They do pick up any little bit of light. Even on a cloudy day, they do pick up light and provide power. But they don't like to be put into series. Now, here's something right here. There's a little blue light. That tells you the panel's working, okay? Little blue light, little blue light, little blue light. Now all of these panels are cracked up here from the heat and the dry desert. But these are all still working. I checked them inside. I got some that are cracked here because at one point the winds had gotten so bad it actually broke the welds on the rack, the metal rack, and snapped it over and leaned it up against the cabin. And at one time that turbine blew down, snapped the cables that hold it, and landed up against that gutter right there. That's why that's bent. Yeah, we do get some nasty winds out here. And back to the Harbor Freight solar panels. All right, so each one of these panels is 25 watts. And when you tie them all together in parallel, you end up with 100 watts. Okay. The amp output on these things is like 5 amps. So it's really not a lot of output power. But there is something else you must know. You cannot hook these solar panels in series because the wiring is too small to handle it, and it will toast them. Okay? It'll toast the wiring. But I've heard of people that actually did hook those panels up in parallel and used a different charge controller. And they said it worked. Now, how long it worked, I can't tell you. I didn't see it. I didn't witness the thing. So all I can say is you have to go by what they said. And you can't always go by what people say on YouTube, because a lot of people on YouTube are just there for the clickbait. They're not there to give you any real information. They just want clicks. They want to get money, and they don't care how they get it. All right, so that is the charge controller that comes with that system. All right, and then it comes with these little wires like this one that plug into it, that you can plug light bulbs into. Now that's not the bulb that comes with it. That's just a bulb that I had here. The bulbs they usually give you are like these. They're CFLs. Well, I don't like those. Okay, so anyway, this is only a 10 amp controller, and it's a PWM, pulse width modulator. It is not MPPT, which is maximum power point tracking. Maximum power point tracking is the best you can get, but there's different levels of that too. Some of them are a premium maximum power point tracking, and others are the original. Now the original is still better than a PWM. Okay, so remember that. Now since that is only a 10 amp unit, and you figure that you're going to be putting 12 volts input into it, that means that it's only worth a good output of 120 watts. Alright, so you got 100 watts of solar coming in, and you can probably stretch that through the best sun to get 120 watts towards your batteries. Okay, that's not going to give you a lot. I know everybody starts hearing amps, watts, volts, and that stuff, and they freak out and they say, "Oh, I don't understand that stuff." Well, stay with me. I'm going to help you understand it. Okay? And the volts times the amps is the watts. So, as you know from simple multiplication in math class, if you multiply two numbers and you get the result, then you can divide one of those two numbers into the result and you'll get the other number. Okay, so basically, if you go 10 times 12, that's 120. So if you've got 10 amps times 12 volts, that's 120 watts. If you divide 10 amps into 120 watts, you get 12 volts. Very simple. It's simple multiplication and division. It's not hard to understand. Okay? So knowing that, now you have to consider that 120 watts is not a lot of power. Okay? Especially since you're only feeding a charge to it of 100 watts. So you can only count on 100 watts. Now if you use the Harbor Freight Thunderbolt batteries, which are 12 volt 35 amp hour, those are lead acid batteries. They're sealed lead acid or absorbed glass mat, AGM, whatever you want to call them. They don't spill if you tip them over. You can lay them on their side and they still work and things like that. But, again, we're going to use the same Ohm's law. Volts times amps. So if it's a 12 volt battery times 35 amps, 35 amp hours is actually what they are. An amp hour, I'll explain that, is how many amps you can run for 1 hour. So 35 amp hours means you can run 35 amps for 1 hour. Alright? So, if we take 12 volts times 35 amp hours, that gives us 840 watt hours. No, I'm sorry. 12 volt times 35. That's going to give us, oh, I got my math on the paper here, but I got it all screwed up. So if you put if you take two 12 volt 35 amp hour batteries and you hook those in parallel, you end up with 12 volts and 70 amp hours, because we know that when batteries comes to batteries, if you hook them in parallel, your voltage goes up. Your amps go up, but your voltage stays the same. If you hook them in series, your voltage goes up and your amps stay the same. Okay, so if you take two 12-volt, 35 amp hour batteries and hook them in parallel, you're going to get 12 volts, 70 amp hours, which is 840 watt hours. Okay, now the thing you have to remember, you were talking about lead acid batteries. We're not talking about LiFePO4s. Okay, so when you're talking lead acid batteries, you're only allowed to use 50% of the battery. So if you've got 12 volts times 70 amp hours, which is two of your batteries, you got 840 watt hours. You actually only have 420 watt hours. So you can only use half of it. Remember that. If you go past half of it, you're going to permanently damage the batteries, and they become boat anchors. They're not worth anything. Now with LiFePO4, you can use 100% of the battery, and although it shortens its lifespan, which they say is 10 years, it'll shorten the lifespan a little bit. It's not going to shorten it that much, so don't worry about it. So go with LiFePO4, get rid of lead acid. They're not worth your time or your money. Alright, so we're down to 420 watt hours. Now what does that mean? That means that you can run 420 watts for 1 hour. Well, take a 100-watt light bulb, plug that into it, and you've got 320 watts left. But you only got 100 watts a panel. So your panel is going to run just the light bulb. If you have anything else running on that, that's going to suck off the batteries. Okay? It's going to take your batteries down. And your charge controller and your 100 watts of solar panels can't keep up with the usage that you're using. So a system like this from Harbor Freight is okay for a weekend camp trip where all you need to do is charge your phones, or maybe run the TV for an hour at night so you can watch a movie before bed. Maybe run a couple of LED light bulbs so you have light. That's it. You're not going to run your household cabin or your RV on 100 watts of solar and a 10 amp charge controller and two little 12 volt 35 amp hour batteries. It's not going to do anything for you. It's going to keep your cell phone charged. Figure it, that's what it is, it's a cell phone charger. Maybe run a light bulb. You know, run an LED light bulb like that, because that doesn't use hardly any power at all. But if you forget it on all night, you're going to wake up to a dead battery, because with lead acid, you only get 50% of your battery power. Okay? Now keep that, driving that into your head, that's very important. Okay, now the 100 watt Harbor Freight solar kits that I was talking about with those 4 panels and the charge controller and the lighting and that stuff, those, when I bought mine, they were $99. Those are $165 now. Okay, that's a 100 watt setup. Okay, so keep that in mind for a second. And let's take a walk. Oh, sorry, I gotta close the gate on the room there. I don't want dogs going in there and peeing on anything, but I also, it's too early in the year, so I don't have to worry about snakes yet. But I keep in the habit of closing those things, the little gates, because that keeps snakes out of there. So I'm not surprised when I do go in. All right, so here we go. Here's my point. Here's my solar panels I just picked up down at my friend's store. Now he only had 4 of these left after when I left there. I took 4. He had 8. I took 4, so he has 4 left, and they may be gone by now. And these are set up with the positives on one side and the negatives on the other side, and that's so that you can mount these things up and hook them in series. Okay. Now, what's the advantage of going in series? Okay, in series, you're going to up your voltage, but you're going to keep the amps the same. And what's the advantage of that? Well, the higher the amps, the heavier the wire you need to carry that. So if you keep the amps down low and keep the voltage up high, you actually are saving money on the copper wire, so it's more beneficial to you. So the thing that you got to think of is these are 365 watts for one single panel. Okay, it took 4 of those little panels over there to make 100 watts. So in order to get what I'm getting out of one of these panels, I would need 3.5 sets of those Harbor Freight solar systems at $165 each. That's like $500. All right. I got these panels, my cost, for $119 each. All right. $119 each. So if I was going to resell these to somebody, I would tell them $200 so I can make a profit on it, because I have to drive 4.5 to 5 hours round trip to pick them up. So I've got gas expenses, lunch expenses, all that kind of stuff while I'm doing it, and I've got to get paid for that. So remember that. Now, he doesn't have any more of these 365s. He got 4 left, but they're probably gone by now because it's been almost a week since I've been down there. But he's got some 500s that he's going to be getting in pretty soon. So they're a little bit bigger than these. And that's another thing. I've got a neighbor who falls for the Chinese lies. And he goes online to these sites that are offering, they'll offer a panel like this for $50, and he thinks he's going to get a deal. No, if you're going to pay $50 for this panel, there's something wrong with it. Trust me, there is something wrong with it. Now, what's wrong with these panels, the reason I get them cheap, is they've got cosmetic blemishes on them. Like if you look right over there under the label, they see a scratch in the white film on there. That's it. Okay, that's the only problem with these. So there's nothing wrong with the power on these. But this guy, this neighbor, I was over there and he shows me this little tiny panel that was only like 12 inches by 6 inches. And he says, these are 750 watts. I said, what? He goes, yeah, I got these for I bought these and they told me they're 750 watts and I got them for like $20 each. It's just, there ain't no way possible. It's totally impossible to get 750 watts into a little piece of flexible plastic that size. Oh no, they got all the new electronics out there now so they can do that. No, they cannot. Trust me. Anybody who knows anything about solar is going to tell you, you just gave somebody a bunch of money for nothing. So I took a voltage reading on the output of those little tiny panels he had. And if you figure the amount of voltage that was coming out of those, the most those things were putting out was maybe 5 watts. Maybe 7.5 watts. And that's where they said 175 watts or whatever, or 750 watts. And it was actually only 7.5 watts, not 750. 7.50. Take the decimal point off, you got 750. So you got a bunch of junk. And you can't beat that. You know, you can't beat that. Now, I took the measurements on these. And one of these is going to go up here on the roof of the van. And I have 2 of the 100-watt Harbor Freight solar panels up there. They're not amorphous panels, okay? They are mono panels, but they're not amorphous. So I'm going to be taking 2 of those off. I got to move this part of the rack back probably right up to that little clamp there, and it'll fit long ways across there and be exactly the width of the van. So they will fit, and I would take off 200 watts and I'm going to install 365 watts, and that will give me a much faster charge going into these batteries. Now this POW Keeper 1220, okay, that's a 20 amp charge controller, and it's supposed to be MPPT. It says right there MPPT, but you see the charge is stopped on it. It's not showing a charge at 13.7, and the settings on it are saying 14.6 for a full charge. So it's 13.7, it's not showing a charge on there. And I have to keep going back in and resetting it and set it to auto. It runs through the auto thing, and then it starts charging again. In the meantime, I'm not getting any charge to my batteries. So that thing is coming out, and I just got the new 30 amp charge controller from WattCycle. Okay, they're gold and blue colors. I like that. The color is good, their logo is good, their equipment is good, their service is good. There's nothing I can say that's been bad about them yet. They are reputable, and when you call in for tech support, you get somebody right away. Okay, they take care of you right away. So great company. So I'll be changing out that pretty soon here. I was hoping to do it this weekend, but yesterday we had 40-mile-an-hour winds over here, and there's no way I could get up on a ladder and work up there with that. And the other thing is I've got to find my PV wire. That's a photovoltaic wire, so that I can change, because these have the SAE type connectors, the little male and female pin thing, a little tiny push-in connector. And these are going to be using those connectors, the waterproof connectors. So I'm going to have to change all of the wiring that comes into the van to goes down to the charge controller. Now, these panels could give you a pretty good electrical shock. So you want to make sure that these are completely covered when you're making your connections. And wear a good pair of dry leather gloves. Those will, if you accidentally touch an open wire, they'll help protect you from getting a shock that could be fatal, okay? Now, I don't want to scare you off, because all you have to remember is when you're working with your solar panels is to cover them. And you always want to cover them anyway before you hook them up to your solar controller, because the jolt of these things being under pressure with the sun beating on them and the electricity instantly going into your charge controller could blow up a capacitor inside your charge controller and render it useless. So cover them up, then make your connections, and you'll be better off. Now, again, battery always connects to your charge controller first. And I was asked, do you have to turn your charge controller on before you do it? No. Most charge controllers don't have an on-off switch on them, unless you get one of the new all-in-ones. They will have a breaker on them. And those are nice because you can make all your connections and then flip the breaker, and you don't hurt anything inside. All right. So for standard charge controllers, small charge controllers, like I just showed you, that PowMister and the Harbor Freight one, as soon as you hook up the battery to that, the screen will come on. It'll read out 12 volts or 24 volts, depending on what voltage you're using. Most of those cheap controllers will be 12 or 24, although I don't think the Harbor Freight 10 amp charge controller is good for 12 or 24 volts. Like I said, it's a camping set. It's for going camping for a Saturday night and coming home on Sunday. That's all it's good for. So don't bet on that for keeping you alive for more than an overnight trip and camping trip. Okay? It's not going to do it for you. I bought those because they were $99 a set, and I got a lot of stuff with them, and I was learning about solar at the time, so it became a learning thing, a teaching thing, and it didn't cost me a lot of money. But nowadays, not worth it. So when I put my other set of panels out here, there'll be 3 of them in series, and those are 40 volts each. They put out 40 volts each. So I'll be putting out 120 volts with 3 of them. Now, on these is the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. These are all 40 volt. And on the 3 connected in series gives me 120 volts. Okay. So that's 120, and that's 120. And then those go into a bus bar inside, and then I connect those to my charge controller, my Midnight 150. All right. So I'm going to stay with the 120 volts input, and I'm just going to be adding one more set of batteries. I'll probably take out that bush, expand this out, or put a brand new rack right here and put them right beside this so that I can tie them all together and bring them in at 120 volts times 3 groups, going in on one set of wires to the bus bar, and then tie my charge controller to that. And my Midnight 150 is good for 150 volts. That's why I'm staying at 120 volts. If I had a Midnight 250, I could put 250 volts in. But again, down the line, I'm planning on going to 48 volts. So it'll be a whole different story. Hey, Tony. Tony from doing Redneck Things Off Grid on YouTube took my advice and bought the SunGold Power all-in-one, and I think he got the 10K, and that's the one I'm going to be getting. So I think he said that they're good for like 500 volts input or something like that, and they have multiple solar inputs on them, so you can put 2 strings of solar into that thing, or 3 strings. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Tony. Leave a comment down below in the comments so everybody can see that. I don't have mine here yet. I don't have the manual here yet, so I can't read it. Now, here's something I'm thinking of doing. This is 600 watts of solar right there, and I don't really need that anymore. And I've got 300 there, and then another 200 on top of there, and then the Harbor Freight's down below. That's another 200 there. I don't need it, all of that, okay? So I may just take one of those racks, modify it to hold the new panels right here, and just pour another slab like that one right here so that I can bolt that pedestal down to it with that rack, and then put my 3 panels on there this way, because they're about the same width as that. So it'd be 1, 2, 3 on there. And if that one won't work, I'll take the measurements. I'll do it with that one, and I'm going to eliminate all that mess and all the hanging wires underneath and all of that. Get rid of all of that, and I can sell those panels to somebody who just needs to keeps some batteries charged, or has a small portable workstation that they have just in case the power goes out, they can keep their refrigerator running so their food doesn't spoil. Things like that. And I'll sell those things cheap just to get rid of them. Now, I think when I bought these 100 watters, they were $129 each or something like that. Now, prices have changed on everything, so who knows. But I thought I was really going to be super powered up with 600 watts right there. No, that's 600 watt light bulbs. That's it. That's all that's going to run. Okay. Now your refrigerators, the new refrigerators right now, use just under 300 watts just for a refrigerator. So 3 of those panels are going to run a refrigerator. The other 3 are going to run everything else. And if there's nothing else, those other 3 are going to be what's charging the batteries. So I'm only going to have a 300 watt input into my batteries. And my battery bank has to be big enough to handle everything I'm running inside. So if I'm running 1,000 watts of stuff in my whole cabin, I want 1,200 watts of battery power. And believe it or not, that's what I've got. 1,200 watts going in those batteries. And I'm using LifePo 4. So, I know I went long here, but there was a lot to cover. Any questions and comments, leave them down below. And if I think of anything that I didn't cover, I will go back and do a second video on that. I think, let me see my list here. Okay. Oh yeah, there's just one quick thing. Donna, you're talking about, do you have to do batteries and solar panels, either both in parallel or both in series? No. Only with the Harbor Freight set, yes. Okay. With the Harbor Freight 100 watt system, Thunderbolt system, and the Harbor Freight batteries, you have to do everything in parallel. Okay, that's the way they're designed. They won't handle series. So that's the answer to that question. Now, if you're using stuff like I'm using here, I can do my panels in parallel or series, either way I want, and I can do my battery bank in parallel or series, and use a proper charge controller to handle the power. That's all there is to it. Now, remember that it's a little bit of a hassle, but you have to do some math and figuring out how many watts do you need to run. So you got to do that through your whole system. You got to go through everything that's electric powered, that you will be using electric power for. Everything that you'll be using either in your RV or in your van or in your panel truck or in your cabin or wherever you're going to live, you have to go through and figure out how many watts you're using. And I came here because I have a kilowatt meter here somewhere, but, oh, there it is. So you do want to get yourself one of these. Okay, this is a kilowatt meter. And what you do is you plug this into an electrical outlet. And then one at a time, each item that's electrical that you're going to be running, even your cell phone charger, things like that, one at a time, plug them into here, press watt on here, and read how many watts that item uses. Then on your list, put cell phone. 5 watts, okay? Refrigerator, 280 watts. Put that all the way down the list. Then add up all your watts together, and that's going to tell you how many watts of battery power, solar power, all that stuff you're going to need to live a normal life. Otherwise, you're going to go back to the old days where you have a fire and a coal lantern for light, or read by a candle at night. And then you're going to have to spend many a days picking wax berries and melting them down and making your candles. All right, everybody. I want to thank you all for joining me. This is G Bear signing off.